Luke. All right, we are going to talk about the big game today, the elephant in the room, Arizona against the Washington schools. What Arizona needs to do to possibly avoid a something you don't want to see happen, especially too with the way that Arizona is playing right now, where you're back in contention for a 1 seed. What needs to happen in order for for Arizona not to get upset? Let's get started here on Locked On Wildcats.
You are Locked On Wildcats, your daily podcast on the Arizona Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and as always, thanks for keeping it Locked On Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, we got a lot to get to this show, but the big thing we need to talk about is Arizona basketball right now is playing incredibly well. And it just goes to show you too the landscape of college basketball, and that everybody is worried about right now. Everybody's worried about their team. Our team, my team just lost. What are we going to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Not realizing a lot of times that everybody else around the country is losing as well. So that's something you got to keep in mind. But if you're Arizona, you certainly don't want to relax on laurels, I guess. So let's look at Washington and Washington State. First, anybody that watched Washington State against Arizona knows that that's not going to be an easy game because Washington State has a few matchup issues for Arizona that could be a problem at some point, and that's certainly something that Wildcat fans should keep an eye on. First, you look at the point spread from FanDuel, by the way, 4.5 points. I get it. Mainly because there are times when Arizona just plays down to its level of competition, and that could happen, especially on the road. And I think the one thing about it is that people do need to look at is they're thinking to themselves, okay, why in the world did Arizona do this? Sometimes other teams just have good players. And let's talk about Washington State for a second. Now, Washington State, Mohamed Gay is one of the better big men in the entire conference, and he is the type of guy who can cause some real problems for Arizona. He's the guy that has caused some real problems for Arizona in the past. And because he's long and he's athletic. That's something that I think people need to keep an eye on, is that when you have somebody that's long and athletic, Arizona has had some issues with that in the past, and that's not always a great thing. Now, Umar Ballo has certainly come around, but at the same time, there's always going to be there's always going to be certain players that have problems with length, and he's got problems with length. That's an issue right now. And again, I don't think that it's going to be something that's going to be rectified, but it goes to show you, though, too, why Arizona could lose the game, or why, if you got into FanDuel and looked at it, you're like, why in the world is this game so close? It shouldn't be this close. Well, that's the reason that it is. That's the reason that it is close, is because of what's going on right there. So again, you need to check. Every single win in the Pac-12 is something that you've got to take people seriously. And if you don't take people seriously, they can come back and bite you at any point, and they have done that before. And it can definitely happen again if you don't watch it. So again, Washington State, the big guy though that you got to worry about is Mohamed Gay. He changes pretty much everything out there. When you've got a player like him, he can. He just causes problems. And so, but now from an Arizona perspective, they've got players that can cause problems as well. And there's multiple players that can cause problems. And I think one of the first guys that you look at and you're saying is Azuolas Tubelis. Now, Azuolas Tubelis obviously is one of the handful of best players in the entire country. If he's not a first-team All-American, then, well, we've seen this before where it's you're not a first-team All-American because you're at Arizona. We've seen that with Derek Williams. We've seen that with other players. But he should be a first-team All-American, and I think that we all know that he should be a first-team All-American. So that's where it is with that. Now, Azuolas Tubelis, though, in this game, basically every game, he should be able to get 18 points, 10 rebounds, and that's a nice little baseline to start from. When you got 18 points, 11 rebounds from your best player, that generally is something that will work very well for you. Now, some of the other players that really need to step up in this game are, I'd love to see Kerr Kriisa actually kind of get off right here, because, again, you got to remember with Kerr, he's a good player, but he's incredibly streaky at that position. And you've got to be able to, quite frankly, you just got to be better at making baskets than he's been. That's been an issue. And Pelle Larsson, kind of the same thing. Different, though, but much the same, though, in that you need to be able to be better than some of the players that you're going against right now. Especially when you're playing Washington State. I do realize that I am speaking somewhat out of both sides of my mouth, but you know what? I don't care. So that's where it is with Washington State. Arizona should win this game, but the fact that it's close on FanDuel shows you that they could absolutely lose this game, and that's certainly not something that you want that you want to look at and be like, that's a possibility, but it is a possibility. So it's just something that you got to deal with. So that's, like I said, that's kind of where we're at with that. Now, looking at Washington is interesting as well, mainly because you watch Washington, you see what they've got. Keon Brooks is a very good player. Arizona fans remember Keon Brooks because he was at Washington. He was at Kentucky, and he was looking to come into Arizona. My phone is dying here. But Keon Brooks is very good. He can put points on the board, and he can put points on the board in a hurry. And I think that's the thing, too, that you're looking at is, like, can a guy put points on the board in a hurry? And if he can, that's something you got to look at. But then after that, it becomes kind of interesting. It becomes a little dicey because you got multiple players out there who P.J. Fuller, not a bad player, not a great player, but not a bad player either. P.J. Fuller out there. But who could put some points up, and then you got Minifield at the guard position. But you don't really have a ton of dynamic players, and even Keon Brooks, who we were rightfully applauding, is not necessarily what you would call a dynamic player, for lack of a better term. I mean, he's good, he's very good. Don't get me wrong, but he's also a guy that you can deal with. And I would imagine that Pelle Larsson will maybe get that assignment. And if Pelle Larsson doesn't get that assignment, it will be somebody it'll be one of Arizona's better defenders. So those are the guys that you got to watch out for Washington. Now, again, for Arizona, we talked about it. Azuolas Tubelis is the best player on the team. As this team goes, as Azuolas Tubelis goes, the Arizona Wildcats go. And, we've talked about that. We've talked about that a great deal. And the reason we talked about it is because it's true. So, again, Azuolas Tubelis is the player that, Arizona needs to really step up and play well in this game. And there's no indication that he won't. Now, I got to give Courtney Ramey a little bit of credit, too. And we're going to talk about Courtney Ramey here on the other side. But first, let's talk about FanDuel. All right. Now, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Check it out. FanDuel is where everybody's going to place bets. You name it, FanDuel's got it. Now, you might say to yourself, Mike, what makes FanDuel so unique? Well, I'm glad you asked me what makes FanDuel so unique. Here's the deal with FanDuel. First of all, everybody uses it. It's been around for years. It's not going anywhere. You get a lot of people that, you're worried about, well, is this going to be around? Is this a fly-by-night thing? No, there's no fly-by-night thing here with FanDuel, and here's the great deal. The NFL playoffs are here. We're really excited about new sports betting partner for Locked On because it's the #1 sportsbook app. FanDuel And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have a lot of features that are very good for you. And again, in NFL playoffs, you can bet $5 and get $150. That's simple, that easy, personal, and again, that's why it's so fun. Again, so football's here. Don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/LockedOnCollege. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back with you, and we're going to talk about a little bit more Arizona basketball. Thanks for keeping it locked on, Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk about what what a sweep would mean. First of all, you got to look at it and you got to say to yourself, all right, who out there in college basketball is kind of that locked in. Get it? What I did there? Locked on. It's kind of that locked in number one seed. And there really isn't anybody. You would think it's Houston, but then they lost to Temple. Temple isn't good. Temple isn't good. So that's something that you got to keep an eye on. Then you look at some of these other teams out there. Look at UConn. UConn was the number one team in the country for a long period of time. That is, that's something that you can't really take away from. UConn. They were good, but like everybody else in college basketball, you come back to your median at some point, and that's what's happened with them. They've come back to their median. And honestly, that's just the way the college basketball is. Again, look at a team like Baylor, been a number one seed the last 3 years. They're ranked like 18 or 19. I do believe that Alabama is the best team in the country. That is the team that I would pick if I had to pick. But again, at the end of the day, I'm not sure that it's really going to matter. But Alabama to me is the best team because I think they have the best combination of length, scoring, guard play, you name it. That's where I really like Alabama and what they're able to do. But you might say to yourself, well, Mike, Alabama, are they locked in for a number one seed? They're not locked in for a number one seed, but they're probably also not that far off from getting there. But the point of this exercise is to show you that nobody out there is a lock to be a number one seed because everybody's losing games. Look at Kansas. I mean, that's look at Kansas. That's another thing. You watch them and they're the number one team in the nation. Everybody for a while, and then they lose 2 straight games, and that's that's just the way it is. So we're all kind of prisoners of the moment. I fall into that, and I know a lot of people will fall into that as well. But it's important to keep in context that everybody out there is losing games right now. There isn't that one. Like, remember a few years ago when it was that Kentucky team that went into the NCAA tournament with basically even odds to win it, which was absurd, by the way. I bet on that one, and I would have bet on FanDuel if I was able to do that at that point. But there isn't that team out there. That's just kind of the way it is. And so again, we'll, Arizona, if they win out, they'll be a number one seed. Heck, I think that they might even be able to be they might be able to be a number one seed with a loss or two. They certainly should be anywhere, or they certainly should be anyway. And, and if they're not, then they're going to be that number two thing. Now, one thing about it, though, when you look at Arizona basketball, you also say that, okay, what are your games coming up right here? Your games coming up right here are, you've got these schools. Obviously, you're going to get a rematch of the LA schools, and that's what I wanted to talk a little bit about here. Because think about it this way: if you beat the LA schools, so you would have 2 wins then against UCLA, which all of a sudden becomes really, really big and very impressive in the grand scheme of things. If that were to happen. Now, I do think that people need to understand that right now, I think the people need to. I think people need to understand that with that any team can lose. Any team can lose, and that's just the way it is. And I think that's again, that's what people kind of get. Sorry, my computer is freezing up here. Very odd. But again, this is that year. But if Arizona were to get wins against UCLA, against USC, both of those two teams are UCLA, in my opinion, is a tournament team. I don't think there's any doubt about that. UCLA is a tournament team. USC is a tournament team. UCLA is one of the 10 best teams in the country, and they're going to continue to be one of the 10 best teams in the country. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But if Arizona were to get that win, looks very, very nice. Then you get a chance in the Pac-12 tournament to be able to replicate that. Now, let's talk about what Arizona could do to even enhance their seeding. Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats. I am your host, Mike Luke. All right, now let's talk now a little bit about where we're kind of at going forward then with the NCAA tournament, everything, or the Pac-12 tournament. So if you were to get UCLA, that would obviously be a very, very nice win. Then not only if you were able to beat UCLA, you could also have the opportunity to be able to vanquish some of your demons. Now, again, hopefully Washington State has already been taken care of. Oregon, you're going to get an opportunity as well. You get a chance to smash down ASU, all kinds of stuff that will give you an opportunity to be able to improve. Now, you also got to be able to take care of business, though, because if you look around, if you look at the naysayers, the one thing that many of the naysayers will say is that Arizona's got some bad losses. You could say that, true, but I think you look around college basketball and all these teams have bad losses. Again, we brought it up with Houston. With Houston, the one thing that everybody, I think that everybody notices is that they just lost to Temple. Temple is a worse loss than anything Arizona has. Not only is it a worse loss than anything Arizona has, it's a far worse loss than anything Arizona has. And Houston's still probably going to be a number one seed. So again, the important thing right now is to not panic if you're Arizona, because again, you've already done what you needed to do. Now you've already done what you need to do. But you can't drop games. You can't have any more bad losses. I almost give Oregon a little bit of a pass right here because Oregon is super, super talented. And I think the thing that's impressive about Oregon is that not only are they super talented, but they're also not very good. They're also not very good, and I think the one thing that people do need to understand is that with Oregon, with Arizona, Arizona is pretty much, they should be better than them. They should be better than Oregon. You know what? And if they're not better than Oregon, then that's a problem because they should be better than Oregon. Now, with the way that Arizona is, that's going to be basically where it's at. So Arizona right now, I think, is firmly in position to possibly get a number one seed. After that, after getting that number one seed, they're also very happy, or, you just got to avoid these losses. And if you avoid the losses, then you're going to be good. If you don't avoid the losses, then that's going to be a problem. Because keep in mind, a lot of people, the naysayers out there, the doubters, are saying, well, Arizona's got some bad losses. Arizona's got some bad, I don't really care about the wins. Well, that's just because they're looking to be doubters. But in all fairness, though, you got to avoid the bad losses as much as you can. And I have every reason to believe that Arizona will do that. All right, we're going to be back with you Friday, hopefully talking about a big-time Arizona win and everything that's going on right there. As always, Thanks for keeping it locked on Wildcats.